Welcome back to the Black Shoe Diaries YouTube channel for another preview of this never-ending season. Who would have thought that it'd be January 5th and we'd still be previewing Penn State football games? But we are, as Penn State is in the College Football Playoff semifinal, going up against Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish. I said on Twitter, Lando, I don't know, you were not a Catholic school guy, I believe. I believe you're a townie too, right? Just like Tim. You were a
No,
state
I'm
college guy?
Irish. I'm Irish. My dad went to Catholic, not just Catholic school, but he's from Scranton, which is
Okay.
like prime Notre Dame, Penn State territory.
Sure. You're a state college guy though, right?
Yes.
Okay, so just like Tim, I only the only rules to be on this show is to be a townie. So, but I said on Twitter, I was like, Penn State Notre Dame really important for those of us who went to Catholic school in Pennsylvania because I am a Catholic school product in Northeastern PA. So this game is going to mean a lot to me because back in high school, when it was like wear your college, your favorite college shirt, it basically was like 45% Penn State, 45% Notre Dame, and then just like the last 10% just like random. So this is important for me. This is important for me, and I'm sure it's important to the rest of Penn State fans around, even if you were not a Catholic school kid. So anyway, to set the stage, as if you're watching this and you don't know, Penn State plays Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl on Thursday, January 9th at 7:30 p.m. How do you feel about the Thursday kick? I mean, I know I guess college is a little hand-tied as far as like the NFL has just taken over Saturdays in January, but man, can't we just all get along? Why can't we just do this on Saturday? Why do we have to do this on Thursday night?
I mean, I guess I prefer Thursday to like Wednesday.
Yeah.
or Tuesday, but yeah, it's not the greatest day of the week to have college football for sure.
No, and the idea of me having to wake up and go to work the next day, regardless of what happens, whether Penn State wins, whether Penn State loses, I don't love that. But I guess that's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
Before we get into what we're going to talk about, Penn State's injuries, talk about Notre Dame's injuries, and talk about everything else. Just because you haven't been on, what was your season prediction for Penn State going into the year? I think all of us except for Tim had 10-2, so I think you were on that 10-2 train as well. A lot of the discussion this week has been about has Penn State already met expectations? Kind of what is your view of Penn State going into this game? How important is it? What does a loss mean versus what does a win mean? I mean, I think we can all say that a win would be absolutely massive, but kind of what is your overall view of this Penn State season as we are here and getting ready for a college football playoff semifinal?
I think, well, first of all, I think it depends on who are you talking to, just me, or are you talking to what I want the general, national perception of Penn State to be?
Yeah.
So I think in that case, I think Penn State has done it exactly what people expected them to do going into the playoff anyway. They had the easiest road. They coming into the season, the big game James kind of narrative was still out there, and people will say it's still out there.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Yeah,
and of course we'll get into the prediction, but even if Penn State beats Notre Dame, there will still be a bunch of people saying Notre Dame's a fraud. This isn't a real win. They have to win the Natty to really escape the narrative. And even then, it's just he won one game. Great job. So I think overall for the season, I think there have been enough snatches of the kind of dominance, on the offensive line and the running game, especially last week's game and handful of games in the beginning of the season. I think I expected that to happen a lot more often than it did. Certainly, every year I have optimism about the receivers. That hasn't panned out. Defensively, I think they've really hit their stride in the second half of the season, and especially second half of games. So, yeah, I mean, I'm more of a people who know that who read our prediction posts. They know I'm the pessimist. Lando is always out there, and I definitely had never thought that Penn State was a national title contender this year. I thought that they were always a step behind Ohio State, and certainly given what we've seen of Ohio State, I think that's still the case.
Yeah.
But I would say they've met my expectations. That maybe not in the individual games they haven't performed up to their ability, but in terms of their season record, I think they've gotten about where I expected them to get to.
It is a weird team too, where I feel like in other years there's been such like at least the years where that we think about it in history of like, oh, those were some really good Penn State teams. Like I count 2023 as like a really good Penn State team, 2017, 2021, or not 2021, 2019, 2016, and then 08, 05, we can go back, 94, whatever it might be. I think there's always been such a distinct line of what that team was, like offense versus defense. And for a lot of Penn State's history, right, it was always like the defense. But you can think back to like that 2008 team that, okay, it was a little bit more like offensively explosive. 2016 was, all offense. 2017 was, again, kind of offensively driven. These past couple of years, like last year, it was like, just like the most elite defense that you can think of. Like that defense will keep them in every game. And I remember like being in the horseshoe last year, thinking like it is more likely that the defense scores than the offense scores. Like, hey, that there was that drastic of a difference. This year, I go back and forth on like especially even going into this game against Notre Dame, which we'll get to the Fighting Irish in a second here, but right, kind of the tell on them is they are so similar to Penn State in a lot of what they do and who they are, that it's like Penn State, it's almost kind of playing a mirror. There's obviously differences, but I almost don't know what I feel better about. And I know so many people are expecting a rock fight, and I don't know if we necessarily get that, because I kind of think I have more faith in the Penn State offense than the defense. Although we'll see what happens in this game. But
yeah, and
we'll
that's sorry. I was going to say that's you're right. I mean, this is the first time in I can't even remember I growing up a Penn State fan, being from, like you said, being from State College.
Yeah.
I was always, not just raised in, but seeing that Penn State's defense was always something you can count on no matter what, no matter certainly once you hit the 2000s, that was the case. Maybe the later stages of the 90s, the defense, the secondary wasn't always, 100% dependable. But this season, some games the defense carries the team, sometimes the offense carries the team, and that's just a weird place to be in as a fan who's been watching Penn State for 30 years, to see that you're not sure what you're going to get out of the defense. And then maybe the offense will step up. At the beginning of the season, it was the offense that was going to carry the team, and then the defense had a stretch where they carried the team, and I'm not sure if I feel good about it or not. I like certainty. I like knowing what I'm going to get out of my team. So it's a little.
No, I guess in some sense it's just proof of like being a good team, like the fact that you can win in multiple ways. Because when you look at like NFL games, for example, like very rarely is it like such a drastic difference between the offense and the defense. Of course, you have your teams and you have your franchises that are more known for one thing or the other, but like. Right, you look at the Chiefs, like for so long, yes, Mahomes, Chiefs, offense, but man, they've had really good defenses with Steve Spagnuolo as well. So you kind of need both to win, and especially with where college football has gone, where that top class has kind of got knocked down a peg or two. All of a sudden, the Georgias and the Bamas, and I guess Ohio State's still pretty high up there. But right, we're seeing kind of everything condensing that. You kind of need both. Not that you didn't always need both, but at least for Penn State, it's certainly that case. But anyway, we'll talk more in depth about the offense defense coming up here in a second. But just to set the stage once again for this Orange Bowl, as far as questions going into it, both these teams are battling some injuries. For Penn State, I know I think AJ Harris, Jalen Reed, and Denai Desan all went down at different points during the Orange Bowl towards the end. It seems like all those guys will be okay. I'm going to knock on wood while I say that. The major question for Penn State is Abdul Carter, who we still don't know exactly what his injury is. Is it an elbow? Is it a shoulder? Is it a bicep? Is it a tricep? No one's really sure. I'm guessing shoulder, just from really nothing other than how he was carrying his arm. I think if it was an elbow, he would have a little bit more movement after the game, but Abdul Carter, Lando, are you a Star Wars fan? I probably should ask
I
you this.
am a massive Star Wars fan. My nickname being Lando. I am a
Okay,
massive Star Wars fan. I know I saw he posted a picture of him in the back to tank.
please
Um,
explain. Please explain it
so
as best as you
so
can.
for those of you who don't know, back to tanks are used by Star Wars characters in all kinds of media to heal the people. It's uh, rapid healing. It can heal you from basically near death to 100%. In the Book of Boba Fett series that was on a few years ago on Disney Plus, he uses that several times. I think that's more due to his age than not. But Abdul Carter posted a picture of a back to tank, and I think everyone knew right away. I mean, you could see all the Star Wars Penn State crossover fans that were excited about that, and whether that's he's saying he's going to need to buy a back to tank to get in there, or he's channeling that energy, the force that's going to help heal him along with the back to, but yeah, that's. I mean, it's a designed to heal the user of that tank.
That's good to know. I obviously saw some people, and it depends upon your interpretation of it. Most people took it as good, and I do think it's a good thing. I don't think Abdul would necessarily be teasing people in that sense. But when you say it's mostly used for like near death wounds, I don't like that. That makes it sound really
Well,
bad.
I
He's
I
he's
mean,
by the way, he's posting it every single day. I know on Twitter. I think he's only
uh,
posted it once, but I'm just so we're recording this on Sunday at 11:21 a.m. So right before the Leicester game. Uh, he tweeted it on his Instagram story. Let me, that was
mhm.
43 minutes ago. So he's posting this thing every day. His profile picture on Instagram is literally Darth Vader now. So he's
I,
really leaning into this.
I will say that while I have only really seen it with near death injuries, that could be due to the um, biology and makeup of the Star Wars characters, that maybe they're a little bit conventionally more tough, or not to say Abdul's not tough. I'm not. Don't come after me, please, Abdul. but that the the extraterrestrial characters in Star Wars, maybe they can handle um, a separated shoulder or a
Yeah.
dislocated muscle or something maybe better than humans.
You're not gonna have Darth Vader just pop his shoulder and be like
Right.
back to tank. So okay, that makes sense. Either way, I know James was asked about Abdul at his press conference on Saturday morning, and he, as always with James, it's like you take what he says with a grain of salt because he says a whole lot of nothing usually. He did basically say that I don't want to say he basically said he painted the picture that Abdul will more than likely give it a go. I think because kind of said like it's gonna be tough to keep him off the field, like things like that. What Abdul we get is going to be a big question, and we can kind of save that for as we talk about the Penn State defense versus the Notre Dame offense. But it's I'm so bad with injuries, Lando. I don't know how close you follow the show, but like Drew Aller against Ohio State, I thought for sure he wasn't going to play. I
Mhm.
thought even Deny ended up playing a little bit against Ohio State too after his pulled groin. I didn't think he was going to play, so I have no idea what I'm talking about when it comes to injuries. Never claimed to have known what I'm talking about, but certainly with Abdul, when we don't even know what the injury is, whether it's a shoulder or an elbow or whatever. But it seems more likely than not that he's not going to be 100%. That he wasn't good enough or healthy enough to go into the game against Boise. And I know we talked about this last episode. I just want to say this again because I continue to see this. The idea that they were holding him out in a game that they were only up 17-14 in the third quarter. And yes, Penn State probably still felt good about the game. I know I felt pretty good about the game at that point. But if you're up 17-14 in the third quarter, you're not just thinking, he's good enough to go in, but let's keep him out. So what do you think we see out of Abdul Carter? Put on your Lando MD namesake, and what are we thinking?
Yeah, I mean, when you see Franklin say, "I don't think there's anything that is stopping him from playing,"
Yeah,
um, like you said, that's really encouraging. Um, Now you have to ask yourself, is a 60% Abdul Carter useful? I think he is. I think
yeah,
if you get one or two plays from him, that can make the difference. I, I mean, I'm more cautious than not, generally speaking. Amin Vanover made such a big impact, and it really has made an impact in this playoff, that I'm not saying you don't need him, because you do. I mean, Abdul is a step or two or three above any other player. I mean, even Deny, I think. So I think I think you see him anywhere from 50 or 60%. Maybe he gets that back to tank and gets up to 80. But I would still be a little cautious if I were Penn State, putting him in as much as they typically do. I think knowing that you have someone like Vanover to supplement, Notre Dame typically has really strong physical offensive linemen. I'm not 100%, knowledgeable about, all of their offensive linemen, but typically, their tackles are really physical and big. So that could be a challenge for, again, any a healthy player, let alone someone hampered guard like Abdul is. So I think you're going to get a couple key plays. I think he's going to play. I would not expect him to play early on. I think they might save him for the second, third quarter. But I'm not a coach, so we'll see.
No, it's tough, and even when Deny had his groin injury against Wisconsin, and he ended up not missing any games. He came back against Ohio State, but he only played 6 snaps or something like that. It was at 3rd and 10 plus was the only time that he came in when it's very obvious passing situations. I could kind of foresee, and again, this is all on a scale of things. Okay, there's a chance that Abdul plays 75% of snaps. There's a chance he plays 35% of snaps. But you can at least foresee the situation where he kind of has something similar to Deny, where you bring him in. Maybe it's not 3rd and 10, but maybe it's 3rd downs where it's greater than 3rd and 6. And I don't want to necessarily waste, or we'll talk about this during the offense defense portion as well. But maybe you just use him you bring him in on 3rd downs, you use him as a spy against Riley Leonard and those situations. So we'll see. So go on to the Notre Dame side of things, because they are also dealing with some injuries as well. They've been dealing with injuries throughout the season. That defensive line is I don't want to say badly beaten, but certainly dealing with their fair share of injuries too. They will be without Riley Mills. I would say their best, or at least most productive defensive tackle. He got injured against Indiana. He's still out for the year. He had 7.5 sacks, 8.5 tackles for loss at 6'5", 295. So a big boy that can move, that can make plays. He's going to be out, and he continues to be out. They had another defensive end that only played in 5 games this year, Boubacar Traore. He had 3 sacks and 5.5 tackles for loss in 5 games. So a really productive player. So this defensive line for Notre Dame is already, hurt, and they've been dealing with injuries throughout this entire season. They still have played well in their absence, right? Traore's been out for half the year, and they've still been one of the better defensive lines. Mills was out for that Georgia game, and you certainly wouldn't have even known that he was out. Defensive tackle Howard Cross, though. So he missed some time at the end of the season, but he did play against Indiana and Georgia. Late in the Georgia game, he had his ankle rolled up on, and Marcus Freeman does say that he will be available for Notre Dame. He'll be available for the Penn State game itself. But just something to keep in mind, that this defensive line is already across the board is kind of on their backups. That they have a defensive end position called the Viper. So at their Viper position, they're already on their 2nd string defensive tackle, because Riley Mills has been out, and now with Howard Cross, we'll see just how healthy he is. I actually don't know if he ended up coming back into the Sugar Bowl or not. It was very late in the game, so I do know that he was able to walk off the field, and there's video of him walking after the game with the trophy with a bit of a limp, but he will give it a go. But as someone who is battling injuries the last couple games of the season, and actually missed some games, and now had his ankle rolled up on again, just something to keep in note, that both teams, especially up front on the line of scrimmage, are battling some injuries as we head into this game. But Lando, let's, as we're almost 20 minutes in, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this, and let's talk about the game itself. Where would you like to start? Notre Dame offense versus the Penn State defense, or the Penn State offense versus the Notre Dame defense?
Let's start on the Notre Dame offense side. I think that's always the matchup I'm interested in seeing, because I have a lot of faith and confidence in the offensive line and the backfield for Penn State, and I think they can really control the game. But it's that Riley Leonard kind of side of the ball that I'm interested to see how the back seven, especially for Penn State, will do, because I think sometimes they really show out, as they did against SMU. And certainly when you have your top pass rusher is hampered, I think they're going to have to really step up against a Notre Dame passer who's about 36 years old or something.
Something like that. Yes, Riley Leonard has been around forever. For those of us that gamble in sports, has really helped me when he was at Duke. I loved betting on Duke when Riley Leonard was their quarterback. So the fact that he is now at Notre Dame is tough. But just to kind of set the stage for this Notre Dame offense, they are second in the nation in yards per carry. They average 6.09 yards per attempt when it comes to rushing the ball. When it comes to passing, though, they're also, I shouldn't say also, they're at 6.9, not 6.09, but 6.9 yards per attempt when they pass the ball. That is 92nd. So we can very clearly see, right, that this Notre Dame team is going to try to run the ball with Jeremiah Love, who also probably should have mentioned him when it came to the injury updates, because he hurt his knee, I believe, against Indiana, and then was not fully healthy against Georgia. I think only had like 5 or 6 carries, and I believe got hurt again against Georgia. He will be a go against Penn State. Marcus Freeman confirmed, but it certainly seems like we're going to see more Riley Leonard running the ball. We're going to see more of their backup running back, who's very good in his own right. They kind of have a Singleton, Catron situation there with 2 very good running backs, Jadarian Price. So we'll see lots of him. But I think that, Lando, the most important aspect for Penn State, and really this game in general, when we say how similar these teams are, where they want to run the ball and they have strong defenses and they win the line of scrimmage and things like that. The biggest difference, or I think what might be the X factor, is Riley Leonard versus Drew Aller. Both very good quarterbacks, but different quarterbacks in how they go about things. And kind of which one gets going is probably going to dictate this game, who wins. So what does Penn State have to do to stop Riley Leonard, knowing that he passed for 92 yards against Georgia, but yet was extremely, extremely effective with his legs?
Yeah, I mean, similar, looking at his numbers against Georgia, very similar to Drew against SMU, it seemed like, in terms of where he doesn't have flashy stats, but clearly he did enough to move the chains and was efficient and enough. So I think containing him in the pocket, I think, is certainly very, very important. I think, certainly these are keys in any game, but pressuring him, making him make very quick decisions, getting him off balance, he getting rushers in his face constantly, I think is going to be really important, because he has the knowledge, the experience to beat you in many different ways. And so I think different, and also disguising coverage and bringing different kinds of pressure. I think Penn State's been successful a few times on bringing safeties and corners, which I could be wrong, but I don't remember them doing it as much in the playoff, as much as maybe that's because they didn't need to. But I think that's a dimension that could be successful. I really do try. Initially, at the beginning of the season, I did not trust the cornerbacks in man coverage, but I think they've certainly proven they're up to the task now. So I think getting him off tempo and off schedule is going to be the most important. Just like Notre Dame's key against Drew, I think will be the same game plan.
Well, and that's what's interesting about this. And what's funny is I feel like almost anything we say about this Penn State defense, we can kind of then say about the Notre Dame defense as well, because I think it's going to be very similar assignments, very similar, scouting reports, what they want to do, other than the fact that Drew isn't quite the runner that Riley Leonard is. But I think both teams are going to play a lot of man. I think that you're going to see that single high cover one safety, and they're going to dare Notre Dame the same way that I think Notre Dame is going to dare Penn State to pass the ball. When you look at like explosive plays, like plays of 20 yards or more for Notre Dame, really, really good when for as far as rushing the ball. How many running plays they have of over 20 yards? I believe they're top 10 in the country in that. When it comes to passing plays over 20 yards, they're in, I want to say, like the bottom 20 or the bottom 30, or maybe it's like bottom 40. I want to say they're like 92nd or something like that when it comes to generating those explosive plays via the air. A big reason for that is because Notre Dame's wide receivers, just like Penn State's wide receivers, not exactly top tier. They have some decent guys. Bo Collins, 37 receptions. Jaden Greathouse, 29 receptions. Jordan Faison has really come along in the playoffs against Indiana and Georgia. He has 29 receptions. They have a good tight end, Mitchell Evans, with 34 receptions. They get their running backs involved in the passing game as well. But just like Penn State, there's some questions about how these wide receivers are able to get open, how they're able to create separation. And then even when they do get open, are they catching the ball? Are they making plays after the catch? So I think for Penn State, right, like you said, like they're going to be aggressive when it comes to stopping the run, the same way that we saw with Boise. Maybe it's not the total complete sellout the way that they did against Ashton Genty, but I don't think it's going to be too far off. I think that you're going to see a pretty similar, idea of let Notre Dame move the ball between the 20s when it comes to if we'll give them a cushion when it comes to passing the ball, as long as we don't lose in the run game. And that's Jeremiah Love, who, like we said, is battling injuries. That's Shadarian Price, who's a big back as well. And that's certainly Riley Leonard. They're going to have to make sure, just watching that Georgia game, there were so many, 2nd and 7s that he turned into 3rd and 2s when maybe they should have been more like 3rd and 6s. But he was, quick enough and strong enough to create extra yardage. That is where I think my concern comes. And I kind of compare it back to other games. Like when we were going to this SMU game, I was concerned. I mean, I thought Penn State was going to win, but it was like, as far as the path to victories go for SMU, it's Kevin Jennings getting out of the pocket and creating more with his legs. I thought that was a big thing. Going into the Ohio State game, I said similar things about Will Howard. Is he going to be able to run more? Because I kind of think that he was going to need to. Now, Ohio State has Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka and all these really good wide receivers. They didn't necessarily have to do that. Notre Dame certainly doesn't have the Jeremiah Smiths of the world. So I do think we see Riley Leonard run more. I'm just concerned with the Penn State linebackers. They have been better recently. They did a great job against SMU. They did really good against Boise State. Like Dom DeLuca, Tony Rojas, great job. Kobe King, as always, did a good job. I'm curious to see who they use as a spy on those long, the 3rd and 7s against Riley Leonard. I think normally it would be Abdul Carter. I don't know if he's going to be healthy enough. Can you do that? So is it a Kobe King, who usually isn't playing on those 3rd and longs usually? Do they do something with Jalen Reed maybe? That's where the big question comes in. But yeah, I don't even think it's so much, like you said, like you need to get pressure on the quarterback. That goes for like when you play any offense, you get pressure on the quarterback. They're not going to play as well. But it's even more so just making sure that you're not creating those running lanes for Riley Leonard. So you got to just be careful. But he's a good player. It's going to be tough. What about the Penn State offense versus the Notre Dame defense? What are we thinking there as far as where are Penn State's paths to victory?
So one element that this might not be specifically, scheme related. One thing that slightly worries me if Notre Dame gets pressure constantly on Drew Aller and makes him, forces him into making quick decisions is now this is ironic coming from someone like me who is an emotional person, is Drew's emotional stability, I guess. I think that is where, not that he's directly facing Riley Leonard, but that's where I have a lot more faith that Riley Leonard's going to be composed throughout the whole game. That if Drew has a couple, hits that he thinks are late, and then he's going off to the official. I mean, you saw that against Boise. He was going after the official after every play almost, trying to get for a call, like he was Michael Jordan in the NBA Finals or something, trying to get a call. That's the concern I have, is if he can stay composed. I think if he can stay composed in the pocket, can stay composed after plays, I think he's going to be fine. I think check downs are going to be really important. Certainly, I think Allen and Singleton have proven themselves very good receivers out of the backfield. I think that's going to be really important to get pressure off of Drew. I think slants are going to be really important. I think Wallace, Evans has really shown up the last couple games as well from the receiving standpoint. But to me, it starts and stops with the running game. I think if the running game gets going, I think there is a clear path to victory, and it also keeps the ball away from Notre Dame's offense. So I think that's the key. But for me, really, the kind of the X factor is Drew staying composed, or if he's not, or if he's emotional, using that emotion, in the right way.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that's something that I've noticed and have talked about in my random thoughts. I feel like 3 or 4 times this year, where last year Drew got a lot of flack for like not being, that kind of not showing emotion at all. And this year, it's almost, you can't complain one year that he's shows no emotion. The next year he's like too emotional. But
right.
I do think at times that he does kind of, I don't want to say throws a temper tantrum, but he kind of does. I mean, like we saw that on the sideline against Minnesota, but even at other times, like during the SMU game, I don't know if the TV showed this, but when they didn't convert that 4th and 1 QB sneak, he like smacked himself in the helmet, like as he was walking off the field. Like it's just like not the look that you want to see from the leader of the team, the quarterback. And I think it's like part of the reason why he has said that he's going to come back next year instead of going to the NFL. Not that he's not emotionally, if we're going to use the term emotional intelligence. I just don't know if he's there yet, especially in the NFL, to lead grown men, to lead 31-year-olds, 32-year-olds, things like that. Because against Boise State, like every single time, and I think it was because they were doing something to mess up with the cadence. That's why we saw so many false starts from Penn State with the clapping and stuff like that. It seems like Boise was doing something. But yeah, any time a play did not go Penn State's way, Drew just right to the refs, just complaining. So I get it. It's frustrating in the moment, but certainly want to see him be a little bit more composed and not let that type of stuff kind of get into his head. Because if you can harness it, that's great, but that's also really hard to do. Penn State offense versus Notre Dame defense. Like we said with the Penn State defense against Notre Dame offense, you're going to see Notre Dame's defense play super aggressive. I think you're going to see a lot of man coverage. You're going to see a lot of, one safety high. It's probably going to be Xavier Watts in the back there, patrolling as a center fielder. And you're going to see Al Golden, former Penn State letterman, former Penn State assistant coach at one point. According to Phil Groves, he was the next coach at Penn State. If you remember that report from 2014, shout out to good old Phil Groves. Said James Franklin gets the job, but that's neither here nor there. You're going to see him blitz as well, because just like anybody else, when you blitz and you're able to get home, create that pressure, it does so much against the quarterback. Penn State's wide receivers are going to have to win at some point. Like, this Notre Dame secondary is very good. Notre Dame's pass defense, sorry, just bring it up here, is 3rd in the country in how many yards they give up per attempt, 5.8. Now, I do want to read off their schedule. Texas A&M, when it was Connor Wegman, who's no longer even at Texas A&M. Northern Illinois, they lost, whatever. Purdue, not exactly great when it comes to quarterbacks. Miami, Ohio, I believe they won the MAC, so we'll give them some credit there. Louisville, Tyler Shuck, who is on his 3rd school. Stanford, can't even tell you who Stanford's quarterback is, to be honest with you. Georgia Tech, team that doesn't really throw the ball a lot, and they didn't even play Haynes King anyway. He was injured. Navy, that's an option team. Florida State, that speaks for itself. Virginia, whatever. Army, another option team. USC, probably the best quarterback they faced in the regular season. Even that wasn't Miller Moss. It was Jada Maeva. Indiana, Curtis Rourke, certainly give them credit for that one. They did a really good job till Indiana kind of, was able to score some points at the end. And then Georgia against their backup quarterback. So, and this was a point I made on Twitter, and this isn't just about quarterback, but kind of across the entire offense. I think this is probably the best offense that Notre Dame has played. I think there's an argument for USC, at least the style of USC, right? USC was able to spread you out in a way that Penn State can't necessarily do. But even Lando, when you look at Penn State compared to Georgia, because I've seen a lot of people say that this is going to be a rock fight, it's going to be low scoring. I don't necessarily disagree. But for people that are expecting something similar to what we saw from Georgia, look at Penn State's skill position guys, right? Quarterback, running back, tight end, wide receiver. Look at Georgia's skill position guys. I think that there's absolutely an argument, and I don't even think I'm being biased on this, that you're picking 4 Penn State players before you pick any Georgia skill position guys. You're picking Drew Aller, you're picking Nick Singleton, you're picking Katron Allen, and you're picking Tyler Warren, all before you get to any Georgia guys, which is crazy to think about. That Penn State is the more talented offensive team than Georgia. And I would even argue that Penn State's offensive line is probably better than Georgia's too. So for people thinking that Penn State's going to struggle at the level of Georgia, I don't necessarily know if that's going to be the case. Not that I'm expecting Penn State to drop, 35 points or anything like that, but I think that this Penn State offense is much more equipped than some of these other teams that have played Notre Dame because they have Drew Aller, because they have 2 really, really good running backs, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, an offensive line that is playing as well as they played this entire season, especially when it comes to run blocking. And Tyler Warren. Notre Dame has not played anyone close to Tyler Warren this year, and that is going to be a big step up. I really like Notre Dame safeties. I think that they have an argument for the best safety, tandem in the country. Xavier Watts is All-American for a reason. Aiden Schuler, who is probably going to get tasked with having to cover Tyler Warren, one-time Penn State target. Really, really wanted him. He was a kid from New Jersey. I just, I think that it's going to be a step up for Notre Dame as well. And I'm not exactly expecting, the 13-10, the 17-14 type game that I think a lot of people are predicting or expecting. I think it's going to be a little bit higher scoring just on both sides, because I think that Penn State's going to have some holes in the middle of their defense like we saw against Oregon. Now, Notre Dame doesn't have the wide receivers that Oregon did to necessarily create huge chunk plays off of that, but I think that they can, Jordan Faison and Bo Collins can find some holes in the middle of the defense to move the ball. But I also think that this is a big step up for a Notre Dame defensive line that, is nursing some injuries and just overall hasn't faced the talent that Penn State has had. I know, and I know I'm rambling on here, but I know going into the Boise State game, I saw some Boise State reporters say that, Penn State's team speed and talent level isn't that high. And you couldn't be more wrong. Talk about your 2001 take. Penn State recruits at extremely high level. Penn State, puts guys in the NFL at a top 7 level. And that's only going to continue. Tyler Warren's a first-round pick. Abdul Carter's a first-round pick. Nick Singleton's going to go really high in the draft. Drew Aller, whenever he decides to move on, is going to be probably a first-round pick too. So I just think that this is, a big step up for Notre Dame. And I think this game ends up being a little bit higher scoring than most people are thinking. What are you thinking score prediction-wise? Unless you have any other thoughts, and I guess you can get into it as you explain kind of what your score prediction is. But what are we thinking the game is?
So, I typically don't pick kind of shootout sort of games like that. I don't think it's going to be, 38-35 or anything like that. I do kind of skew closer towards the 17-14, but I right now I have 21-20. I think, I think 24 of those points maybe might come in the first quarter and a half, and I think then teams are kind of settled in a little bit. But certainly right now I have Notre Dame 21, Penn State 20. I really have a hard time picking Penn State, partly because I like the kind of reverse psychology or the trying to, the reverse juju or whatever. But I just think Notre Dame is going to make one more play. I think it's going to come down to, specifically, you mentioned Dom DeLuca and Tony Rojas. Defensively, I think it's going to come down to those two guys for Penn State. And then I think offensively, I think, assuming that you're going to get what you're going to get normally from Allen and Singleton, I think it's going to be Amari Evans or Harrison Wallace is going to have to make a play. I think if those 3 or 4 guys do what they need to do, I think Penn State wins, 24-21. But right now, at this moment, on, as you said, Sunday, 10 of noon, January 5th, I have Notre Dame 21, Penn State 20. I'm going to go a little bit farther than that. I'm going to say Penn State has the ball with a chance to win the game.
God.
And Drew makes a mistake. I don't know.
We get the Justin Fields interception against Clemson with hands on the head.
Yeah, that's
I can't
about
believe
where I'm
it.
going.
Yeah.
I will, though. I meant to say this when we were talking about Abdul Carter. I was trying to find the exact wording of the quote when we were talking about how much he's going to play. I believe it's from the Water Boy, last game of the season. Brent can't hold anything back now. so I think with that potential, it doesn't make sense to save. I mean, as long as you're not going to damage him long term, I think it doesn't make sense to hold him out like you did for Denai and Sutton earlier in the season. So I think Abdul Carter is going to play a little bit more than maybe when expected, and then maybe he makes a play. But I'm sticking with what I said. I think 21-20 Notre Dame is what as of right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going back and forth, and I've been saying this for weeks because I was arguing with Notre Dame people on Twitter during the lead up to a lot of the ranking shows because Notre Dame fans just couldn't fathom any way that Penn State would be ranked ahead of Penn State would be ranked ahead of Notre Dame. So forever I've been like, these teams are super, super similar. Like back then I was like, I can understand why you would think Notre Dame should be ranked ahead. I can also understand why Penn State should be ranked ahead. These teams are very, very similar, and it's very apropos that they're now meeting in the the semifinal with a chance to then play for the national title. There's a reason the line is 1.5. It's basically a pick 'em. I'm glad that you went with Notre Dame because I didn't want both of us to pick Penn State. So I will go with Penn State. I'm going to go 28-24. So definitely have the over. I think the over is 46.5 or 47.5. So again, I don't think they're going to blow that out of the water, but I do think it's going to be a higher scoring game than people think. I think these offenses are going to have a little bit more juice than we necessarily expect. The thing to remember against Georgia is that Georgia had their opportunities for some big plays, right? If that walk on, I mean that with the walk on when he interfered with the ref, that was a massive play that ends up getting brought back instead of being, I think it would have been inside the 10. It gets brought back to like the 26 or something like that. Dylan Bell ends up dropping, just a wide open ball deep. Another one of Georgia's, I guess, really only touchdown. They had another deep pass on. So when you play man coverage with only one safety and you're blitzing and stuff like that, same way that Penn State found out against Oregon, like there are going to be shots to be taken. And I expect Notre Dame, the same way that we saw Boise really, try to stop the run and do everything they can. Those shots are going to be there. And you mentioned before, like Trey Wallace, Amari Evans, they have to come up with a play here or there. Once again, I feel like I say this every big game. Amari Evans is going to be so massively important. If he's able to, get a 35-yard touchdown, a 50-yard touchdown, whatever it might be, it completely changes the game. I think we get one of those. I think Notre Dame's corners are good, but when you're one-on-one with somebody like Amari Evans and that speed, and you have someone like Drew Allar who can just launch the ball, 65 yards, it really equalizes things. So I think that those opportunities will be there. I think Notre Dame's going to do a good job of containing Tyler Warren. I don't expect Tyler Warren to have like the 11 receptions for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. But Warren has hit the point where he's going to get his. Even so many people talk about the Ohio State game and how Ohio State took Tyler Warren away. Sort of, a little bit. Like, he still had, I think he had 4 catches for like 48 yards, and he had that massive rushing play. And I thought it was interesting that we didn't get any Tyler Warren package against Boise State, if my memory is correct. I think we absolutely will see that against Notre Dame, especially if, Notre Dame starts to, double bracket Warren and stuff like that. But I don't know. I think it's a 50-50 game. I just kind of think that Penn State just has a little bit more juice offensively when it comes to when you account that Jeremiah Love is battling a knee injury that's probably going to keep him from his normal carries. I think that Riley Leonard could be an equalizer as far as his legs go, but I just have more faith in what Penn State has as far as Tyler Warren and both running backs and Drew than I do with what Notre Dame has, because I think the defenses are going to be pretty similar. I think even the offenses are going to be pretty similar. I just think that Penn State's going to have a little bit more firepower as far as creating big plays go. But that's kind of where this game is at, where something like, one play here or there can change the game. Same thing as we saw against Georgia. Like, Notre Dame was able to get a fumble right before the half and capitalize on that with a touchdown, able to have that kick return. So things like special teams could absolutely play a factor in this game too, which is always tough to quantify. So yeah, I'm going to go with Penn State 28-24, and you have Notre Dame 21-20, correct?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we're both expecting close games. As we close out, other game that may or may not be important for Penn State. Penn State plays on Thursday. This game will be on Friday. So depending upon if Penn State loses or wins, we might care a lot. We might care not at all. But Ohio State plays Texas in Jerry World, the Cotton Bowl. So I imagine will be a pretty heavy Texas crowd, which is an interesting factor to consider. Lando, what are your thoughts? Who do you think wins that game as far as the Buckeyes and the Longhorns?
I mean, it looks like no one is going to touch Ohio State at this point. I mean, if they're playing how they need to play, how they can play, Texas doesn't have a shot, I don't think. There's no shot.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's tough to have watched this Texas team struggle to put away Arizona State and even Clemson. I mean, Clemson was able to move the ball on them, especially through the air. And if there's one team that can take advantage of you through the air, it is Ohio State. So yeah, as long as Ohio State does not have this, Ryan Day wanting to prove to Lou Holtz and Michigan that they can run the ball and they're tough and big and strong, then yeah, they are going to be tough to beat, because you have Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka, Cornell Tate, 3 guys that are all, going to be NFL wide receivers. I could be at quarterback, and I think that they're going to win. So yeah, I also have Ohio State winning. So we'll see. I don't know if I mentioned this on here, if I mentioned this other places, even prior to I think it was after the SMU game, actually. I was talking with my friends and I was like, how this is going to go. It's going to be Notre Dame semifinal against Penn State, and that's going to be Ohio State in the final. Like, those two, I think if you ask Penn State fans, like, 2 most hated fan bases, Michigan might be up there too, but Notre Dame's definitely top 5 for a team that they don't. Penn State doesn't really play at all. Notre Dame's definitely top 5, and Ohio State is very high up there too. So it's very like video game-esque, like final bosses. Like, you have to beat these two to move on. And personally, like, in this Ohio State Texas, like, if Penn State wins on Thursday night, there's a real part of me that I want Ohio State. Like, I mean, I'll take a national title by beating Texas, but you almost, like, it would just be so beautiful if they go into a national title game against Ohio State and they beat Ohio State, and like that is the final dragon slay for James Franklin. For myself, I'm leaving the internet if that happens, Lando. You will not. I'm not resigning from BSD. I'm just leaving. Like, it'd be like, oh, is Pat still around? Like, no, we haven't heard from him since national title game.
And I did see you tweet that, so
yes,
I'm a witness that. In addition to saying that, you have also put that out there as well.
Yes, I will be gone. You will never see me on the internet again. I'll create other hobbies. I'll get into like hiking and woodwork and knitting and stuff like that, because there's no point in continuing on if you beat Notre Dame and Ohio State.
See, and that's tough now. Like, I don't want to lose the like the Corbler internet presence. That's a tough call.
It might be worth it. It might be worth it. All right. So to wrap this up, we're going on almost an hour now. You have Notre Dame winning. I have Penn State winning. We think it's going to be close. For all those that are listening, thank you for listening and for watching. Make sure that you are subscribed to the YouTube channel. It really helps us, and it really doesn't mean anything for you at all. You'll barely even notice that you are subscribed, but it helps us. Make sure you're liking the video. That helps with SEO and stuff like that, and just getting the word out there about this. And once again, it doesn't, all other than clicking, it doesn't do anything else for you. So it really helps us and doesn't hurt you at all. So make sure you're doing that. Read our stuff on blackshoediaries.com. And I'm 99% sure that Tim and I will be live after the, after the Orange Bowl. So check us out at, probably 11 o'clock. If we get, it's ESPN, so it says 7:30. It's probably going to be a 7:45 kick. So probably 11 o'clock or so we will be on. And I can promise you, I will put on a show. Win or lose, it's going to be exciting. So Lando, thank you for stepping in for Tim. Really appreciate it and really appreciate the conversation that we had. We will see you guys in a couple days.